just not good enough. We don't obviously chemistry, talent wise, just everything, and it was clear. Like I said, these last few games, they just from the beginning of the game, they were just aggressive. Veteran team, obviously, championship team, and one of the best teams that we have in this league. I love this city. I literally, have done everything that I can. This situation is crazy. It's something that I don't think can be fixed. So,
Hey, Coach. Tough one as the streak kind of continues. Did you feel your team getting, tight at all down the stretch? Do you feel like the weight of these losses is kind of building?
Yeah.
Trash. Because I'm going there thinking James going to be there, you know what I mean? Once I get traded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he already wants out. When I landed, I'm like, what up, woo? I'm about to land. I go do my conference. Well, I'm on my way to Atlanta for little baby birthday. He talking about you want to get on jet with me? Just got traded here. I can't fuck up. I got to be on good terms. I don't know how the owner is, the GM is. I don't know nothing. It's new. This ain't like I'm in DC. I'm in DC. I'm like, hell yeah, we out.
Right.
It's my show.
Yeah.
This ain't my show over here.
Yeah, nah.
So we do that. So he don't come to training camp, none of that. So, that news is all toxic. For me, I ain't playing 2 years.
Right.
Mom passed, Achilles, then COVID. So I'm like, I don't give a who playing, who not. I just want to hoop.
I'm just trying.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah! He got it!
We are here to fuel Rockets news. This is a Rockets Fuel Report, and I am your host, Ashar Binkley. You can always find me over at Twitter at Binkley Hoops, or you can find my written work over at the Dream Shake or SB Nation. And on today's show, of course, we're talking about one of the hottest teams in the league. That is your Houston Rockets. We're coming off a 107-104 win over the Denver Nuggets, the defending champs, as that made it six in a row to end the homestand, which the Rockets went 6-1 on before they head out on the road. And they won't play again until this Friday, so we have plenty of time to talk about the Houston Rockets. But on today's show, we actually be talking about the top 3 reasons the Rockets that went from punchline to possible playoff contenders, something I think most Rockets fans didn't think was going to be any chance that would happen this season. But the Rockets are already out of the gate a lot better than they have the past few seasons. So let's get right into those top 3 reasons why the Houston Rockets are one of the possible surprises of the NBA this season. Up until the last 3 seasons, the Rockets were considered legitimate contenders out west, and at times even contenders for the title. Harden would go, even though Harden would recycle through co-stars like cardboard and trash day, but even despite the drama he had with each of his running mates, the Rockets were always in contention. We all know what happened and why the Rockets didn't win, so I won't go too deep into that, but the Rockets were contenders more times than not. From the time James Harden was traded to the Rockets in 2012-2013 season until the now infamous press conference in 2020, the Rockets and its fans always felt like they had a chance to win. Then as the wheels began to fall off, the Rockets became the joke of the NBA. John Wall, who hadn't played in years, was brought in as part of the Russell Westbrook trade prior to a Harden departure, and then Harden was eventually, of course, shipped out to the Brooklyn Nets. The Rockets had brief surge after the Harden trade. As we all know, Christian Wood and the Wow Factor Rockets, they went on to win several games in a row, but then Christian Wood got hurt prior to the All-Star game, and then after that, that was pretty much it as far as that team was concerned. That team would go on to lose a team record 20 games in a row, and that was just kind of just the beginning of the problems for the Rockets and their fans. We all know how it went with Coach Silas dealing with the 20-game losing streak. We remember the press conference where basically he was almost brought to tears having to deal with that, historically bad losing streak that the Rockets had during that season. And of course, we all know about John Wall and the on-again, off-again relationship he had with the Rockets. He did play majority of that first season, but after that, he did not play again for the Houston Rockets as they had a let's just say, a disagreement on how he should be used. John Wall didn't feel that Kevin Porter Jr. or anybody should be starting ahead of him, and he should be coming off the bench. But that kind of what the Rockets were moving towards. They were moving towards having the young guys kind of run the team, and John Wall didn't feel like he wanted to be coming off the bench, playing any amount of minutes off the bench. He felt like he should have been starting. So that kind of led to the Rockets and John Wall sort of coming to agreement, even though we would find out later that John Wall didn't agree with any of it at all. And he would go on to completely trash the Rockets. After the Rockets eventually worked a buyout with him, he ended up trashing him on a podcast where he said that he basically didn't even know what was going on. He got off a plane and he thought he was going to be playing with James Harden, and James Harden said, I'm not even in town anymore. I'm off seeing Little Baby or somebody. So that kind of didn't work out too well during the John Wall and Houston Rockets phase. But again, John Wall will stay on the bench for an entire year before he was bought out. And Rockets will continue to build up draft picks, hoping that maybe they can catch lightning in a bottle and maybe eventually turn this thing around. But we know that didn't happen, unfortunately, as the Rockets will continue to go on and have the worst 3-year stretch in franchise history the last 3 seasons. I mean, think about it. The Rockets have been around since the 60s when they were playing in San Diego. And to think about the last 3 seasons have been the worst 3-year stretch in Rockets history. That'll tell you what Rockets fans have been through these last few seasons. But the good thing is there was some optimism going into this offseason, especially before the draft lottery, as many were hoping that the Houston Rockets would be able to bring in possibly Victor Wembanyama. But before we even got to that, the Rockets decided to move on from Coach Silas and go in a different direction. Before we got to the draft lottery, of course, the Rockets moved fast and brought in Ime Udoka as the head coach. There were a lot of different candidates. Actually, there was a time where people thought the Rockets were going to even interview Nick Nurse, but the Rockets felt like, hey, we cannot wait on Udoka. There's other teams still in the playoffs, but if they lose, then maybe they'll be looking to bring in Udoka. And then if they're bringing him in, they're in a much better spot than the Rockets, and they have a better chance of bringing Udoka in. Because at the time, when Raptors let go of Nick Nurse, Udoka was possibly going to go to Toronto, but the Rockets moved fast. They brought him in. They did the right thing by bringing him in quickly and not letting any of the teams get to him. And they got their man. They brought in Ime Udoka. And then, of course, we know what happened with the draft lottery. The Rockets did not get that number 1 pick. They did not get the number 2 pick. They didn't even get the number 3 pick. They got the number 4 pick and Amen Thompson. And they just began to move on after that. They brought in players like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. And, of course, we all know the firestorm that happened when they brought in those 2 guys that a lot of the national media, even some Rockets fans, did not believe, especially the overall deals that they gave the 2 players. They gave, of course, Fred VanVleet the max at 3 years, even though the 3rd year is a team option, which is a huge deal, especially when you're giving that amount of money to somebody who's about to turn 30. But the real firestorm was when they brought in Dylan Brooks. Of course, we all know Dylan Brooks had a disastrous playoff series against the Lakers where he made some comments, of course, about LeBron, and it didn't work out too well as the Lakers bounced Memphis from the playoffs and LeBron pretty much dominated that matchup. So a lot of people didn't even think that Dylan Brooks was even going to be in the league, and this is not exaggerating. It was some people saying that he would be playing in China or overseas somewhere. So when the Rockets gave him a 4-year guaranteed $20+ million contract, even though it is a descending contract, which means it's going to be over the years, it's going to continue to go down. But still, a lot of people were shocked. Now, a lot of people gave the Rockets a lot of grief about that deal when they did bring in Dylan Brooks. But as I'm about to tell you now, those deals are a big reason why the Houston Rockets are where they are right now, which is 6 in a row and 6-3. And yes, it's early in the season, but firmly in the playoff positioning, however you want to put that 9 games into the season. But they are there right now as a top 4 seed. So let's get right into the top 3 reasons why the Rockets, like I said, have went from a punchline of the NBA to possible playoff contenders. And number 1 reason is the team defense. We all know if you watch the Rockets any amount of time in the last 3 seasons, they have been absolutely dreadful on defensive end. Last season, the Rockets ranked 29th in team defense as far as defensive rating. they were one of the teams where, hey, if you were struggling coming in playing the Rockets, you would circle the Rockets game on your schedule because you know that was a game that you would absolutely get right on the offensive end. I don't know how many times we saw where the Rockets will go up against opposing teams and it'd be a player you never even heard of. They would have a career night against the Rockets, and you would never hear from them again. They would never have another game where they put up 30, 40 points, but they would do that against the Rockets on a consistent basis. I remember 2 games in particular last season that stood out to me was when they played the Sacramento Kings back-to-back games. They gave up 135 and 139 points in back-to-back game to the Kings, who were a good team last year, don't get me wrong, but it's not exactly like they were the 2017 Golden State Warriors. The Rockets got absolutely destroyed those 2 games, and that kind of was the height of the Rockets' bad defense the last 3 seasons was those 2 games, those 2 embarrassing games. But this season has been a complete turnaround. Even if you factor in the horrible season opener loss to the Orlando Magic, where they got completely destroyed after they cut that lead down to 1 in the third quarter, they got blown out for the rest of the game. Even if you factor in that game, the Rockets are still a top 5 defensive ranked team as they rank number 5 in defensive rating this season. It has been a complete turnaround from last season. Even deeper into the numbers, it tells you how much of a team they are on the defensive end. They don't have this one player that's a dominant defensive player. Don't get me wrong. They have Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, who are both really good defensive players. Jason Tate off the bench. But they don't have a dominant player in the paint that controls the paint and that is a dominant shot blocker like a Jaren Jackson Jr. or a Jared Allen or any of those type of players. The Rockets don't have that type of player. If you actually look at the numbers, the Rockets are next to last in block shots per game, a little over 3 a game. They have some players like alperensengun who can block some shots every once in a while, but it's not anything that's going to stand out. If you go look at the top players in total blocks on the season, Rockets don't have a person in the top 60 in block shots. So that tells you that it's not just one player, it's multiple players playing team defense. They're communicating well on defense. They're helping the helper. Something I know some broadcasters like to say a lot. They're not leaving anybody out on the island. They're guarding. They're helping out their teammates. And that's really stood out during this 6-game winning streak to the point, like I said, where during the 6-game winning streak, they're ranked number 2 overall in defensive rating, something that we haven't seen since the early days of PJ Tucker, when Chris Paul was here, that 2017-18 season when the Rockets were at the peak of their powers, when they were fighting the Golden State Warriors to try to get to the finals. That's the last time we were seeing defense like that here for the Houston Rockets. And like I said, it really starts with the vets like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. And that leads me into my number 2 reason why the Rockets have taken off this year, especially during this 6-game winning streak, and that is the veteran leadership on this team. During this winning streak, and even before the winning streak, if you go all the way back to training camp, when I was out at training camp, one thing I noticed whenever I would walk into the gym, when they would let the media in to see part of practice, was there was a lot of talking going on. And it was usually either Fred VanVleet or Dylan Brooks directing people where they need to go, specifically Fred VanVleet on offense. And when Dylan Brooks was on defense, he was constantly talking, whether it was talking mess to other players or actually kind of barking out defensive orders. It was always a lot of talking going on. And you can tell that it was a different vibe from last season when I would go out to practice. You can tell it wasn't as much joking around going on. It was real serious business when they were out on the court. And it started with Dylan Brooks and started with Fred VanVleet. And you have seen his veteran leadership, especially during the 6-game winning streak, to where when the Rockets were having troubles, Fred VanVleet would step up on the offensive end, or Fred VanVleet would get a huge steal, or even when Dylan Brooks was struggling with a shot, he would get a huge charge call against somebody, or he would dive on the floor going for a ball. That veteran leadership has really made a huge difference. We definitely saw in this last game somebody I haven't even mentioned in Jeff Green, somebody that I don't think a lot of people probably gave too much of a thought to when the Rockets signed him this offseason. But he has came up huge these last 2 games. He's actually finished these last 2 games for the Rockets. And he was the biggest reason why the Rockets won this last game. And he's had double-digit scoring in the 4th quarter last game to help pull out a win against his former team, the team that he won a ring with. So that veteran leadership has stood out a lot. Emma even mentions during his press conferences how Fred VanVleet is a person that is an extension of him on the court. A lot of times, Fred VanVleet may even be calling his own plays, to where Udoka would say, "Hey, if you see something that you like, then I'll let you make the call." You only do that with a veteran. You don't do that with somebody that's only been in the league for 1 or 2 years. So that tells you how much confidence already that Ime has in Fred VanVleet. Another thing that really stood out to me about the veteran leadership is when I asked Alperen Sengun, what does it mean to have a player like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks on your team? And this is what he said.
Is it having veterans like Fred and Dylan, especially in these close games?
Like, I can say, like, me and Jalen, they are, like, Fred and Jeff and Dylan, they are our ass. Like, you know, like, even when we playing bad, like, we are down 9, you know, Jalen has down, he's, like, going scream at him, like, come on, like, blah, 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 you know. Dylan to me, Jeff to me, like, you know, which is great for us, and that's, we like learning, you know. We're gonna be, how I can say, like in 5 years, 6 years, we're learning this, and we're gonna do it with other players when we grow up, you know, which is great for us.
So as you saw in that clip, he said that, if you didn't hear, he basically said that Fred, Dylan, and Jeff be on their asses, basically, the young guys, whenever they make a mistake, they're correcting the mistakes, not to a point where they're overly criticizing them or they're yelling at them and they're not getting their point across. They're making a point to where, hey, if you make this mistake, this is how you correct this mistake. And that's something the Rockets haven't had in the past few seasons. Yes, they had players like Eric Gordon, who's definitely a veteran. They had players like DJ Augustine. Yes, Boban was on the team. But you got to have players that you are vocal leaders that are actually playing major minutes. That's the type of players that you'll listen to. Fred and Dylan have both been winners. Dylan has won defensive playoff because Fred is an all-star, former all-star. He's won a ring. These are players that they're listening to because they are major parts of the rotation. Eric Gordon, towards the last couple of seasons, especially last season, pretty much was checked out and was ready to go. Even when PJ Tucker was still here, he had checked out. He was ready to go. So these young guys really haven't had a veteran player who plays major minutes that they can look up to and say, hey, when they tell them that they made a mistake, they will actually listen to them. And something Dylan also said, he said that, yes, when we get on them about them making mistakes, they're like sponges. They take it in, they listen to what we got to say, and then they make the corrections. That is huge for a young team. Even though the Rockets, they bring in veterans, they're still a young team. They still have young players. So to have that veteran leadership on the team makes a huge difference. And another thing that makes a huge difference is the final reason why I think the Rockets have went from punchline to possible playoff contenders, and that is someone I just spoke about earlier, and that's Coach Ime Udoka. When the Rockets brought in Udoka, as I mentioned earlier, they had several other candidates that they were considering bringing in, but Udoka was definitely probably at the top of the list. And yes, he had only coached 1 season, but he's also been under head coach Greg Popovich over in San Antonio. I don't think there's a better mentor you can have than one of the greatest all-time coaches in Greg Popovich. So Udoka, even though he only had the 1 year as head coach, he's definitely had a lot of experience as a coach in the NBA, and that's something that we're definitely seeing so far. His leadership, like the vets, has meant everything for the Houston Rockets. He's a no-nonsense type of guy. He says exactly what he means. It's been several times where unsolicited, he say, yeah, if this guy's made this mistake, this guy made this mistake. He doesn't hold back at all when it comes to talking about his players, but he also defends them and has their back a lot of times when, hey, yes, they may have did this wrong, but we didn't do this right as a team. Or, yes, so-and-so had a really good game, but we did this. It's always go back to the team with Udoka, and you can tell in the practices that he has complete control of the team. Whatever the situation was with Silas did not have complete control of his team. He didn't have complete control over the roster. He didn't have any control over the roster. He didn't have complete control even over the rotation. He didn't have complete control over who will just play and who didn't play, because a lot of that was dictated by the front office. And we see now that Udoka has pretty much final say when it comes to pretty much everything to do with the actual how the team plays. You can even see it during the press conference when people would ask something specifically about a player and their playing time or something like that, and Rafael would say, well, that's a question for coach. That's something that he wouldn't necessarily have said under the Stephen Silas regime. So there's definitely be a changing of the guard as far as who's control of this team, and that is Ime Udoka. And you can definitely tell by the way he has his rotations. We see it. We saw it the last couple of games. He sat out Jabari Smith for majority of the fourth quarter, his last two games, and played Jeff Green. I don't think that Coach Silas ever had that power or would ever do that in the 3 years that he was here with the Rockets. Ime has complete control of his team. He has control of his team during practice. You can tell that when people make mistakes, he holds them accountable. There's a lot of accountability going on, something that we also didn't see the previous 3 seasons. So Ime Udoka is a huge reason. He may be the number one reason why the Houston Rockets have went from where they've been the previous 3 seasons, where, like I said, the worst 3-year stretch in Rockets history, to now where, yes, it's only 9 games in, and I'm sure people outside of Houston are like, okay, what's the big deal? It's 9 games in. They're 6-3. I mean, let's not go overboard. But when you've watched some of the worst basketball you have, I've been watching basketball for decades, a long time. I go back all the way back to the late 80s Houston Rockets. That was the absolute worst basketball I've seen. I even saw, I watched basketball after Hakeem Olajuwon left, and it was just the Steve Francis years. At least that was entertaining. This past 3 years have been horrible as people, as Rockets fans have to deal with that. So to now see a coach who has full control of the team, to see a competitive team, a team that actually believes they can win night in and night out, it's definitely been a refreshing turnaround watching these Houston Rockets. And yes, it's only 9 games in, but if they continue this path of where they are right now, they have a real shot at making at least a play-in, something that I think most Rockets fans would be absolutely ecstatic about if that was to happen. And like I said, Ime Udoka is a huge reason for that. That was the top 3 reasons I believe the Rockets are no longer a punchline in the NBA and now are possibly fighting for a playoff spot this season. So definitely let me know what you think in the comments. We appreciate the support as usual. Like I said, if you can hit that subscription button if you're not subscribed already, because if you look at the numbers, a lot of people that watch these videos aren't subscribed. But if you hit that subscribe button and give us a like, that definitely helps us with the YouTube algorithm and helps us bring more of these videos to you every single day. As usual, we appreciate all support. I will be out at practice, and I will definitely be bringing you all those videos. So to be able to see those videos and know when they come out, hit that subscription. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the notification so you know when the videos come out, and make sure you check out the next episode of the Rockets Field podcast that will hopefully be dropping this weekend.